Welcome to TSAT. Today I am going to discuss a topic in environment regarding biogeochemical cycles. So, here in this context, before getting into the content, we need to know the meaning of the heading biogeochemical cycle. So, in this context, bio means life, geo means earth. The matter, what is happening is moving from one sphere to another sphere. So, in the process of this movement of matter is moving in different spheres into abiotic and biotic spheres. Abiotic means the spheres in the environment which are not living or non-living. Biotic means spheres which are living, means flora and fauna. So here in this process, as I have discussed in the previous session regarding the different kinds of spheres in the environment, the hydrosphere constitutes water, atmosphere constitutes air, lithosphere constitutes rock, biosphere constitutes living beings, that is flora and fauna. In this process, matter moves from one sphere to another sphere. So, how this process of movement of matter is happening will be the part of discussion in biogeochemical cycles through different spheres. In this context, one factor which need to be highlighted has been discussed with you earlier. The main point is the movement of matter in environment is cyclical. So, whereas in the case of energy is considered, the movement of energy is not cyclical. The energy movement is unidirectional. The energy from the solar radiation enters into the Earth's atmosphere, being trapped into the biosphere, especially in the plants, and abiotic aspects, especially the air absorbs certain temperature, the hydrosphere absorbs certain temperature, the lithosphere absorbs certain temperature. This temperature being absorbed by these different spheres is being reflected back into the space directly. So, the movement of energy is not cyclical, it is unidirectional, which is being dissipated into the space. The incoming energy from the space through solar radiation and the outgoing terrestrial radiation, which is in the form of infrared radiation or heat wave, is being dissipated into the space, and this movement of energy is not cyclical, but the movement of matter is cyclical. So, you will be able to understand how the movement of matter through explaining different kinds of cycles, you will be able to understand why movement of matter is cyclical. The earth, since a biogeochemical cycle or substances turnover or cycling of substances is a pathway by which a chemical substance move through both biotic and abiotic components of the earth cycles. So, what is happening here is the movement of matter happens through biotic and abiotic cycles. So, what is a biotic cycle? When it is happening through living beings, it is biotic cycle. In the absence of living beings, when the cycle of matter is happening, it is abiotic. So, what are they? With the discussion, you will be able to understand different variant biogeochemical cycles. So, which comes back to the starting point and which can repeat this material move from one place of biosphere to another sphere through biogeochemical cycles. The term biogeochemical tells us that biological and chemical factors are all involved in the circulation of chemical nutrients like carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium and water, etc. There are certain minerals which move in a certain pattern. So, through the biological, physical work are known as biogeochemical cycles. The first example of such is carbon cycle. So, the carbon cycle is the biogeochemical cycle by which carbon is exchanged among biosphere, the pedosphere. Pedo means something related to soil. In the bedrock, and hydrosphere and atmosphere. So, the carbon is being circulated to these different spheres in the carbon cycle of the earth. So, how it happens, let us discuss. Carbon cycle comprises a sequence of events that are key to make the earth capable of sustaining life along with nitrogen and water cycle. So, in the case of carbon cycle, the carbon dioxide which is present in the atmosphere is being absorbed by the plants, and it is being fixed in the process of carbon sequestration as part of carbon, because living organisms contain certain amount of carbohydrate or carbon containing molecules. Carbon is being trapped in the plants. So, and plants absorb carbon dioxide and we consume food. So, the plants and animals and human beings, in the process of consumption of plant products, carbon is established. When these animals and plants die, they are being buried under the earth. So, in this process, what happens is plants and animals respire. As we respire, plants also respire. In this, which is energy releasing metabolism. When it releases carbon dioxide in the process of respiration, the carbon dioxide is being released back into the environment. So, for example, carbon which is being fixed through the carbon sequestration in the fossil fuels like coal and petroleum, when these coal and petroleum are also resultant of photosynthesis in the geological era, which have been fixed into these fossil fuels. When these fossil fuels are burned by these industries and automobiles, again this carbon dioxide is being released into the environment. So, this is how again the cycle repeats. Again from the environment the plants absorb, and this process of cycling of carbon happens, which has been explained in terms of carbon cycle. The global carbon budget is the balance of exchange of carbon between carbon reserves or between one specific loop of carbon cycle. So, you have got different carbon reserves. For example, the flora, all the plants have got abundant amount of carbon in terms of carbohydrates, etc. We are made up of certain molecules predominantly containing carbon, is a carbon reserve. Atmosphere contains huge amount of carbon dioxide, is a carbon reserve. So, from one sphere to another sphere, the carbon is being absorbed, and it is and cyclical process of movement of carbon happens in certain loop. The next cycle is nitrogen cycle. So, in the case of nitrogen cycle, the importance of nitrogen is every organism is made up of a protein, whether it is a plant or an animal. One of the basic element to call a protein essential is nitrogen. So, apart from carbon, hydrogen and oxygen, a protein has got an element known as nitrogen. So, nitrogen, or with which the protein is made up of, the proteins are the building blocks of our body. We are constructed with molecules known as proteins, where nitrogen is essential. So, the basic source or reserve of nitrogen is air. 78% of the air contains nitrogen, but this nitrogen cannot be directly utilized by the plants. This nitrogen which is present in the air need to be transformed into another form, which can be reabsorbed by the plants. So, in this process, there are certain mechanisms or naturally established processes, like for example, you have got certain bacteria in the soil like the rhizobium bacteria or azotobacter bacteria, which is present in the soil, fixes the atmospheric nitrogen, making them available to the plants. In minor quantities, this nitrogen is being available to the plants through lightning, which is a minor quantity. So, here nitrogen is present in the environment in a wide variety of chemical forms, including organic N2 ammonia, nitrate, nitrites, nitrous oxide and nitric oxide, or nitrogen gases. So, it is present in the form of nitrogen gas also. So, the organic nitrogen maybe in the form of living organisms, in the form of humus, etc. The process of nitrogen cycle transformed nitrogen from one form to another. So, these are all nitrogen is a gas in the atmosphere. This need to be converted into these forms like ammonia, nitrites, where the plants can absorb them. So, the microscopic organisms like the azotobacter or the rhizobium can change their form into these absorbable nitrates from nitrogen gas in a symbiotic association sometimes with leguminous plants. So, the atmospheric nitrogen is being absorbed by nitrogen fixing bacteria into ammonia, and these are being absorbed by the plants, and what happens is this is being consumed by the animals. When the animals die, they decompose and mix into the soil back. This nitrogen which is being fixed in the soil by the denitrifying bacteria again converts the molecular nitrogen into nitrogen gas and mixes into the environment. So, one way is lightning, and denitrifying bacteria makes this nitrogen available to the atmosphere back, breaking the molecules. So, this is the process. So, they may ask you, what is the bacteria responsible for fixing nitrogen into the soil? What is the bacteria responsible for releasing the nitrogen back into gas into the environment? Or denitrifying bacteria might be a question. So, in this process of discussion, I will be giving you the different types of microorganisms responsible for this fixation and release of nitrogen into the atmosphere. So, in the case of nitrogen fixation, mostly N2 is done by freeing living or symbiotic bacteria known as free living or symbiotic bacteria living known as disotrophs. Example, Frankia is Frankia in symbiosis with certain organisms, and azospirillum. These bacteria can combine gaseous nitrogen with hydrogen to form ammonia. So, ammonia can be absorbed by plants. An example of free living bacteria is azotobacter. Symbiotic nitrogen fixing bacteria like rhizobium. These are all the different examples of microorganisms which helps in fixing the atmospheric nitrogen available to the plants. So, they may ask you the microbes azospirillum, azotobacter, rhizobium. These are some microorganisms which fix the atmospheric nitrogen into nitrates. Today, about 30% of the total fixed nitrogen is produced through industries through Haber-Bosch process. So, what is the process being involved in manufacturing nitrogenous fertilizers artificially in the industries might be a question. This is the process which you need to mention. Next is assimilation. Plants can absorb nitrate or ammonia from the soil through their root hairs, where nitrate and ammonia ions are used to form amino acids and nucleic acid. So, amino acids are the basic blocks or molecules to manufacture protein. So, which requires nitrogen. Nucleic acids, like you might have heard about DNA, adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine, where the genetic code of an organism is being coded. So, these nucleic acids with which the DNA sequence, DNA molecule is being formed, without nitrogen, there is no possibility for the formation of these nucleic acids, which is helpful in formation of DNA. The plants provide amino acids to bacteria in the symbiotic association. So, this is how the microorganisms are fixing the essential nitrogen to the plants. Ammonification. When a plant or an animal dies or an animal expels waste, the initial form of nitrogen is organic. Bacteria or fungi converts the organic nitrogen within the remains back into ammonium by a process called ammonification or mineralization. So, the waste of these plants and animals to make this nitrogenous compound available to the plants, these certain bacteria converts into available nitrogen to the plants, which is known as ammonification or mineralization. Next is nitrification. It is done by the oxidation of ammonium by bacteria such as Nitrosomonas species, which converts ammonia into nitrates. Other bacteria species such as Nitrobacter are responsible for the oxidation of nitrates into nitrate. So, in infants and so here, because of these kind of artificial supply of nitrogenous fertilizers to the cultivating crops, what happens is this nitrogen will be mixing into the groundwater table or drinking water sources. When these nitrogenous fertilizers being mixed into the drinking water, it results into a kind of disease to a baby, infants or small babies, known as blue baby syndrome. This disease is caused by methanoglobemia. So, this is caused by the artificial supply of nitrogen to the farmlands, which mixes into the drinking water. Denitrification. Denitrification is the reduction of nitrates back into nitrogen gas, completing the nitrogen cycle. This is performed by a species of bacteria known as Pseudomonas and Clostridium in anaerobic conditions. So, they may ask you which is the bacteria responsible for converting the ammonia or some kind of molecular nitrogen back to nitrogen gas is Pseudomonas and Clostridium, can be given as an example for denitrification. So, this leads to completion of the cycle, again the nitrogen into from a compound being converting into a gas. Next is phosphorus cycle. In the case of phosphorus cycle, it is the biogeochemical cycle where phosphorus moves through lithosphere, hydrosphere and biosphere. So, in this context, the phosphorus is not entering into atmosphere. Out of the different spheres in phosphorus cycle, there is no involvement of atmosphere. So, the atmosphere does not play a significant role in the movement of phosphorus, because the phosphorus is embedded in the rock in the lithosphere. So, here this is how the phosphorus cycle happens. Might be because of the weathering and erosion of the rock. The phosphorus dissolves in the water and supplies to the aquatic environment and even to the terrestrial environment, and absorbed by the plants, consumed by animals, and again the degradation of the animals add the essential phosphorus after the decomposition, and the weathering of rock materials also supply the essential phosphorus. So, even in the case of DNA is considered, phosphorus is essential because phosphorus and sugar acts as a backbone for DNA molecule to form. So, phosphorus is also very much essential for life. For example, our bone composition consists of calcium phosphate. So, phosphorus is essential for even bone formation, nucleic acid formation. So, without which life cannot be expected. So, such is the importance of phosphorus. Low concentration of phosphorus in soil reduces plant growth and soil bacteria growth. So, phosphorus cycle happens through chemical, biological and microbiological process. Long-term transfer of global cycle is derived by tectonic movement. So, what happens is tectonic movement is the uppermost lithospheric plate, the crustal plates move from place to place. Because of this reason, it leads to volcanic activity at the boundaries. So, at the volcanic activities at the boundaries of the plate and at any other fracture zones leads to the emergence of phosphorus. Because of the phosphorus present in the rocks, the phosphorus can be made available to the plants. Microbial is microbes disintegrate phosphorus and make available to the plants. So, they break the molecules as been given to you, the examples, and make this phosphorus available to the plants. We have phosphorus, animals and plants. Animals and plants decay, disintegrate, mineralize and mix the phosphorus into the soil, which is made available to the plants, which can be reabsorbed back by the plants. Human activity causes major change in the phosphorus cycle for the purpose of phosphorus fertilizers. We exploit the phosphorus rock, and what we do is we use these phosphorus rocks in manufacturing phosphorus fertilizers for the industrial purposes. So, what is the ecological function of phosphorus? Phosphorus is an essential nutrient for plants and animals, as I have specified. It forms part of important life-sustaining molecules in the DNA. Phosphorus doesn't enter the atmosphere. So, in the case of nitrogen cycle or in the case of carbon cycle, these elements, this matter has entered into the atmosphere, but phosphorus has not entered into the atmosphere. It passes through lithosphere to hydrosphere and biosphere. So, it is essentially required in DNA. It doesn't enter into the atmosphere. On this basis, objective bits can be formed. So, phosphorus remains mainly in land and in rock. 80% of the mined phosphorus is used to make fertilizers. Phosphates from fertilizers and sewage causes pollution in lakes and streams. Over enrichment of phosphates in aquatic ecosystem leads to massive algal blooms, so which leads to a condition known as eutrophication. So, because of an artificial supply of sewage to a lake, so when the drain is been connected to lakes nearby or rivers nearby, or the phosphorus material from the industries or from the agriculture drain is being mixed into the lakes, it leads to a condition known as algal bloom, leading to eutrophication of lakes. So, eutrophication is a condition where the plant biomass enormously increases and it leads to the death of the lake. Always for an aquatic ecosystem to survive, there must be a balance between a plant biomass and animal biomass, because in the consumption of oxygen being released by the plant biomass and the animal biomass, what happens is when there is disproportionate biomass during night time, it leads to increase in the biological oxygen demand. The reason behind it is, like animals, plants also respire absorbing oxygen. But during daytime, because they release oxygen, so eutrophication is a condition where the lake dies because of enormous increase of plant biomass and animal biomass. In this context, what happens is when there is an artificial supply of sewage or any other phosphorus material being added because of the industrial effluents, what happens is there will be enormous increase in the plant biomass. So, plants absorb oxygen during night time like animals for the purpose of respiration. So, because of this reason, because of the enormous increase of plant biomass, during night time, because plants also absorb oxygen and stops releasing oxygen because photosynthesis doesn't happen during night time. So, because of this reason, it leads to the increasing in the biological oxygen demand. So, because the oxygen demand increases, both plants and animals die and decay and the lake dies. This phenomena of decay and death of lake is known as eutrophication. So, this unnatural mixing of nitrogen waste and phosphorus waste leads to a condition known as eutrophication. Weathering of rocks and minerals release phosphorus in a soluble form where it is taken by plants and it is transformed into organic compound. So, this becomes part of living molecule and turns into an organic molecule. Example is DNA. The calcium phosphate in the bones. So, fossil fuel impact. Burning of coal, natural gas and other fossil fuels has greatly increased the amount of sulfur in the atmosphere and oceans. It has resulted in the doubling of the amount of sulfur since the past 100 years, which is responsible for acid rain. This is responsible for releasing sulfur dioxide, leading to the formation of sulfuric acid, leading to acid rain. So, SO2 mixes with precipitated water, resulting in water mixing in the formation of an acid, resulting in the increasing in the acidity to 4.3 pH, causing damage to both natural and man-made systems. Here, one thing you need to know is, a question can be asked, what is the pH of rainwater? Might be a question. The pH of rainwater is 5.6, it is acidic. The pH of rainwater is not neutral, it is not 7, it is 5.6. The reason behind it is, naturally atmosphere contains carbon dioxide forming carbonic acid. That is the reason why the rainwater is acidic. The natural pH of rainwater is 5.6. But adding fuel to the fire, when the fossil fuels are being burned, releasing sulfur dioxide, nitric oxide, etc., forming sulfuric acid and nitric acid, resulting in increasing in the pH of the rainwater, getting to 4.3 pH. So, we call it as an acid rain when the pH is around 4.3 or less than 4.3, we call it as acid rain. pH is potential of hydrogen ion releasing capability of a chemical. Next is the mercury cycle. In the case of the mercury cycle, the source of mercury is as a mineral found in the rocks, and the effluents being released by industries or burning of coal, because mercury is a metal, a liquid metal at the normal temperature, which can be evaporated very easily in the process of burning of coal in furnaces, etc. Mercury becomes vapor entering into the atmosphere. So, mercury is the only metal which is a liquid state at room temperature, can be a question. It is a volatile metal. Volatile means which can be turned into vapor very easily is known as volatile and evaporates naturally. Mercury occurs as a cinnabar. So, what is the ore of mercury might be a question to you. So, cinnabar is the name of mercury ore, or weathering of rock slowly releases mercury into the environment traces. Amount of mercury is found in coal, which is being released into the atmosphere in the process of burning, and in the case of volcanic activity and forest fires, mercury is released into the atmosphere. So, these are the different sources of mercury into the environment. So, because of this volcanic activity, because of the weathering and erosion of the rocks, the mercury enters into the environment, and the industrial effluents, when they are being released into the water, leading to the increasing in the concentration of mercury. So, in this process, when we depend upon the aquatic organisms like fish, when we eat, which are living in polluted water, might be an ocean or might be a river, the mercury slowly accumulates into living organisms, leading to biomagnification. Volcanic activity, industrial activity, weathering and erosion, gases in the air, HGO gets into the water and enters into our body from fish and aquatic organisms. Inorganic mercury can be converted by bacteria into metallic cation known as methyl mercury. So, it is being converted into a methyl mercury, into a molecule, and enters into living being. So, it is existing in our body in the form of methyl mercury. Volcanic eruption can increase the atmospheric mercury 4 to 6 times, which is responsible for 50% of the bioaccumulation in fish such as tuna and of the atmospheric mercury. So, this might be a question. What is the main factor for the mercury in the atmosphere? Volcanic eruptions, 50%. Anthropogenic actions. Anthropogenic means man-made factors. Actions are also responsible for the emission of mercury into the atmosphere. 65% of the mercury is being released because of coal-fired power plants, 11% from gold processing. So, anthropogenic factors are this. One is because of coal-fired power plants, the second is gold processing. Can be a question. Percentage in terms of mercury through atmosphere through coal-fired power plants and gold processing. So, friends, we shall meet in the next session discussing a different topic in environment. Thank you.